look, in her defense, I will come to Pam Bondi's defense a little bit.
Oh, this is going to be good. I can't wait to hear this.
She needs the help, Andy. I wish you well.
Yes, good luck.
Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Tuesday, September 16th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and joining me are RCP President and co-founder Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. So, gentlemen, lots of reaction today to something Attorney General Pam Bondi said yesterday on the Katie Miller podcast. So I'll just run it. Here's what she said.
There's free speech, and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything. And that's across the aisle.
So, Tom, she's been criticized for this really from all quarters. She tweeted out what I guess you would call a clarification. So let's just start there. She said that she really was talking about direct threats of violence. So do you think her walk back worked? And what do you make of her statement?
Well, look, it was one of the only things we agreed upon yesterday about this. We discussed it on the podcast, was that you shouldn't be locking people up for things they say. Free speech is protected. Pam Bondi should know this, by the way. She's the top law enforcement officer of the United States. She should understand the Constitution. You cannot, this is not, Great Britain. We're not going to throw people in jail for, making trans jokes or whatever. I mean, it's just, and so, it's fine that she made the clarification, but those words should have never come out of her mouth in the first place. She should know better. And the fact she didn't know better, makes me wonder.
Yeah. Carl, Sonia Sotomayor, the Supreme Court Justice, said this today. She said, every time I listen to a lawyer-trained representative saying we should criminalize free speech in some way, I think to myself that law school has failed.
Well, yeah, and if you get Sonia Sotomayor and Christopher Rufo on the same side, you've really stepped at it, which is what Pam Bondi did. She was a person, President Trump, when he wins the second term, he has all these people that he appoints in the cabinet in the wrong jobs. I've talked about this before. Tulsi Gabbard would have been great running the VA, and I can think of a lot of. Robert F. Kennedy was a hell of a litigant. He'd have made a good attorney general. He'd been really good at the EPA, although I'm not sure President Trump wanted him going after big companies for polluting. But but Pam Bondi wasn't in that category. She was Attorney General of Florida. She seemed very well qualified. She seemed during her confirmation hearing to be well spoken. I didn't cover her closely. Obviously, she's very conservative, but this was not only tone deaf. It made you wonder if she's just in over her head, because you put cuffs on people. This, by the way, comes on the heels of the context for this is Charlie Kirk's assassination. He was very adamant on this point that there's no legal hate speech in the United States, and shouldn't be. There's vile speech, there's gross speech, there's terrible speech.
He just tweeted about it I think it was last year or a few months ago, and someone actually dug that up and posted it on top of Bondi's comments to show not even Charlie Kirk agrees with her.
Yeah. So you get this, and the left's been, and the conservatives have been fighting this for years. She mentioned something where these people didn't want to make a poster at Home Office Depot in support. If a group wanted to have a vigil for Charlie Kirk, they refused to make it. I mean, these two cretins, they were fired, as they should. At least one of them was, as they should have been. On the show yesterday, Andy, you'll remember this. You initiated the conversation. It led to a bit of a difference between Tom and I, but not much. I said that there are certain professions, teaching kids and being in the medical profession, where if you're going around saying hateful things, maybe you should lose your job. I wasn't sure that exists every job. I'll call those dweezels at Home Office Depot kind of undermine my argument. Tom was saying it's legitimate to fire these people. Those people, but Pam Bondi wants to go after them. What's the tort? What's the crime? What's the charge? She seems to think, yeah, and Tom mentioned England. That's right. They do this in England. Right. We fought a war with England over this issue. Yes, taxation. Yeah, all these other issues. But it starts with free speech. By the time the American Revolution happens, and we're going to celebrate 250 years from now, this was a key thing. This had been building in the colonies since 1735.
It's the reason it's the First Amendment in the Constitution.
Well, look. In her defense, I will come to Pam Bondi's defense a little bit.
Oh, this is going to be good. I can't wait to hear this.
She needs the help, Andy. I wish you well.
Yes, right. Good luck.
I am just saying that it may be that she doesn't know when we talk about hate speech what we're talking about. Maybe she misunderstands the term because she used the term very directly in that clip. And then in her clarification, she said, you cannot threaten people's lives, that speech is not protected. And on that point, she's correct. So maybe in her mind, when she uses the term hate speech, she doesn't mean what we think of hate speech and the way we've been talking about hate speech for the last decade. She means something very specific, which is that you cannot threaten people. That's the best I can do, guys. What do you think?
Well, that's pretty weak tea, Andy, but I admire you for trying.
It's not bad.
No, good for her. Pam Bondi has a noble person in her corner, Andrew Walworth, but it may not be enough. Andy, the president and J.D. Vance and now Pam Bondi have talked about, and Stephen Miller, they have talked about dismantling these networks that they say are fomenting political violence. I don't quite know what they mean by that. In this case, this person allegedly, this Utah young 22-year-old guy, allegedly confessed. I think the Washington Post has story, he confessed online to a chat group to doing this horrible crime. But there's no evidence that some foreign power or some Antifa, like some shadowy network, encouraged him to do this or promoted it or gave him the weapons or did any of the things that would form a conspiracy. So I think all this talk from the administration is alarming. And more than that, at this time, they have public opinion on their side. And to push to go too far now is really wasting an opportunity. It's a teachable moment for the nation. And the criticism from the left about the Trump administration is that Donald Trump's an authoritarian who wants to suspend the Constitution, suspend all your rights. And they should be careful about this. This is the time when people are really listening to how they speak and parsing their words. They need to be very precise about what they're talking about and not alarm people and not do anything to promote a backlash. That's my view.
All right. Well, I want to, since you anticipated my next soundbite perfectly, I'm going to play you Stephen Smith talking about this.
Do you mean Stephen Miller?
Oh, did I say Stephen? I'm Stephen Miller. I'm sorry.
Well, you might as well tell our listeners now why Stephen Smith is on your mind, Andy. Oh, well, you brought it up. Okay. Stephen A. Smith
is will be here tomorrow in our slot on Wednesdays for replacing RealClearPolitics. But we'll get to that later. Here's Stephen Miller.
Yes, so I believe what you're referring to is there are these nonprofit entities that organize, as the president mentioned, attacks on ICE officers, attacks on Border Patrol agents, organized doxing campaigns, which are a violation of federal law. They break off cement and they bring into riots. They have organized drop points for weapons, organized drop points for a gas mask, organized drop points for all the materials necessary to launch a riot. Of course, you saw that during the Black Lives Matter riots as well, too. So there's this whole network of organizations. And I think the key point the president's been making is somebody is paying for all of this. This is not happening for free. And so under the president's direction, the attorney general is going to find out who is paying for it, and they will now be criminally liable for paying for violence.
So, Tom, that's pretty clear what they're doing. What do you make of it?
Yeah, look, I do think there is we've seen, we saw it in the Black Lives Matter riots. We saw it, quite frankly, in Los Angeles. We see it when the National Guard and the Marines were in Los Angeles. You saw these trucks showing up there were pictures of them with these, gas masks that were, basically in boxes as if they'd just been pulled off the shelves. There is a group of quote unquote professional agitators that seem to show up wherever there's an opportunity to create chaos and in some cases incite violence. I do think that is true, but we don't know a lot about it. So I don't have a problem with the administration looking into that and trying to find out, where these groups are coming from, who's funding them, how they operate. I think all of that is perfectly legitimate. We don't want, quite frankly, those kinds of if they're showing up to incite violence and agitate, they should be held, I think, criminally liable. So that part, again, I want to see the proof is in the pudding, and I want to understand exactly what the administration is doing here. I agree with Carl. I think the administration should be careful to not overreach and not go too far, because it will immediately invite a backlash, and it will confirm all the priors that the administration critics have about them, that they're, that they are trying to, install a fascist regime and be authoritarian and all that. But that notwithstanding, I think if they stay within the lines here, and that it probably would be a good thing to investigate some of these groups, because we know they're out there. We've seen the traces of them in a lot of these over the years, in a lot of these instances, and they're a problem, and they should be held accountable.
Well, I remember after 9/11, we were attacked from Afghanistan, so we went to war in Iraq, and a lot of people thought that was a very big problem, and that it's led to problems in the Middle East. Charlie Kirk was assassinated by, as far as we know, a lone gunman. And, they talked openly about giving him the death penalty. And maybe that would be a deterrent. I don't know. But this is a different subject. There is no evidence that this gunman was involved with groups like Antifa, which is a loosely affiliated anarchist group, very violent, or Code Pink, which started as an anti-war group, has become, some people think there's some evidence, virtually a Chinese Communist Front group. He wants to invest. You want to investigate these groups and try and establish that what they're doing has gone over the line into domestic terrorism. I'm all for that, but I don't think that has anything to do with what happened to Charlie Kirk. And I think for a week or two at least, we could keep the focus on this awful development and figure out how do we prevent things like this from happening in the future. It just seems to me like, remember Rahm Emanuel once said, Christ is a terrible thing to waste. And he was speaking in context, and that's not a direct quote. Ron was making a healthier point than I'm making, but I don't think they ought to look at it like this, because people are angry that they can, start going after their enemies in a way that otherwise they couldn't. I just don't think it's an appropriate response.
Yeah, well, I mean, Tom, President Trump said on Fox yesterday that he would like to see a RICO investigation into George Soros and the Ford Foundation. So it does seem, to Carl's point, we are aligning several issues here into one, all in this sort of moment where the Kirk assassination is so fresh in everyone's mind.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But I also think if you step back and take a look at this sort of broader context, this stuff has been going on for a long time. I think these folks have been, particularly since Donald Trump came on the scene, right? They have been, well-funded and getting more and more well-organized. And so, I think that's the context, the idea. And J.D. Vance stated this when he was doing the Charlie Kirk show the other day. He said specifically this article from The Nation, and they get funding from Soros, and they get funding from the Ford Foundation, that these people were lying about Charlie Kirk. And he was talking about the fact that these groups are getting taxpayer, they get tax breaks from the U.S. government. Now, I'm not suggesting that, we need to, again, criminalize what's written in The Nation magazine.
I hope.
God forbid.
Right.
But again, in the broader context, if these groups have been, organizing and agitating for violence and crossing criminal lines, they should be investigated. They should be held accountable. And I think that's what they're getting at, is there's been this atmosphere for the last 10 years that, calling Trump a fascist and authoritarian and Nazis, and calling, people like Charlie Kirk and others, and sort of dehumanizing them and making them into these bogeymen, that gives license to people like this young man to go commit these horrible crimes. And so I don't think they're completely disconnected, but I do understand and agree with the point that, there isn't any evidence that this kid was, funded by them or funded by anybody else. But I don't think they're completely, disconnected from each other.
All right. Well, we're going to have to leave it there, but I'm going to just quick little plug for Real Clear Politics, because I do think we mentioned The Nation. If you want to see, maybe The Nation isn't part of your regular diet, news diet, but occasionally you'll see a piece from The Nation on Real Clear Politics, and you'll see a piece from the National Review, and you'll see a piece from any number of other organizations that you might not necessarily come across in your day-to-day reading. And that's what Real Clear Politics does. You should you want to engage in these ideas. We encourage you to do that. Go to Real Clear Politics. So there's my plug. We'll be back with more right after these words. FBI Director Kash Patel was on Capitol Hill today for a hearing in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He was talking about firings at the agency. He talked about the Epstein files and his handling of the investigation into the Charlie Cook assassination. So here's a moment from the hearing. This is Senator Cory Booker, Democrat from New Jersey, and Kash Patel's response.
I think you're not going to be around long. I think this might be your last oversight hearing. Because as much as you supplicate yourself to the will of Donald Trump and not the Constitution of the United States of America, Donald Trump has shown us in his first term and in this term, he is not loyal to people like you. He will cut you loose.
That rant of false information does not bring this country together. If you want to work on bringing this country, it's my time, not yours.
My God.
If you want to talk about
dividing this country,
it is my time.
I follow you on your social media posts that tear this country apart.
To address your falsehoods.
So, Tom, I do that just to remind people of what passes for exchange of views on the Senate these days. What did you make of the hearings?
I mean, that wasn't even the worst one. The one with Patel and Adam Schiff, where they were just sort of yelling over each other for like a minute.
You are the biggest fraud to ever sit in the United States Senate. You are a disgrace to this institution.
Look, I hate these hearings. I really do. I don't know. It seems like, and I complain about them all the time, so I know I sound like a broken record, but our politics now has gotten so partisan and so performative that we can't seem to have hearings, particularly when you have someone like Cory Booker, who's running for president, right? Clearly, and who wants to make a show of things because he knows that's what his constituents want. And then you've got Kash Patel, who wants to, is just completely fed up with, being lectured by Democrats. So he goes back at him I don't know, Carl, you've covered Washington for a lot longer than I have. I mean, you just can't imagine anything like this happening in a hearing 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. I mean, there was a level of decorum and respect that these hearings had. Now, I don't know that necessarily equates with we got more information from people and they were somehow, maybe that's true, but at least these days, it's just hard to watch because it's so cringy. It looks like a bunch of kids screaming at each other and doing it for reasons other than to inform and enlighten the public about what's going on.
I agree with that completely, Tom. And I'm very critical of the Democrats for this because today's hearing is a good example, and that clip that Andy played perfectly illustrates it. Cory Booker seems to be cutting a campaign ad, is what he's doing. He's not trying to elicit information from the witness. And in this case, there were questions to ask Kash Patel that I think he would have trouble answering. And that, they have fired, there's a lawsuit about it. And the New York Times has a nice story about it, but they fired all these FBI agents who they think were part of the team that criminalized the differences Trump had with the archives and with Jack Smith, and these are FBI, these are field agents. Some of them they've fired had nothing to do with the case they were accused of. They've apparently been confused with somebody else. They've been sort of openly slandered by Kash Patel and right-wing bloggers. And I would have liked these guys to ask Kash Patel specific questions about these agents, two of whom were combat veterans of the United States military. Why did you let this person go? He says he wasn't even assigned to that case. What's your, and just let him talk. And this, it's the rudest thing that Democrats do it more than Republicans. It's you ask a question and then you shout at him, yes or no answer. And then he starts to answer, you interrupt him and start shouting, I reclaim my time. Kash Patel used that line against the Democrats, say, this is my time. They ask a question, they should get some answers. And I think Kash Patel, in a respectful hearing, would have trouble answering some of these questions. Yeah. And instead, they just wanted to grandstand and make points with their base. It's not effective politics. It's not even very patriotic in my view.
Yeah, I was struck, by that Cory Booker saying that you will not be here long. That was the Kash Patel Job Security Act he just enacted right there. Because there's one thing Trump will do: he will keep Kash Patel in that chair.
He's not going to let Cory Booker fire him. In other words,
exactly. Yeah, it's just seemed like he doesn't quite understand the game that's being played.
Or maybe it's reverse psychology. He wants Kash Patel in that job, so he knows how Trump will react if he says that he's going to fire him.
Oh, it's like the Battle of Wits and the Princess Bride. Yes.
I'm not sure that we might be giving Cory too much credit.
Right. But, Kash Patel has been criticized from the right for his handling of this investigation into the Charlie Kirk assassination. It was, I think, 33 hours was between the horrendous act and when they put him in custody. So that seems to be a pretty, I don't think you could fault them for not moving quickly or being efficient. But Tom, do you have any problem with the way Kash Patel handled this? Because other people on the right do.
I mean,
Well, wait a minute. He announced they had a suspect in custody before they did. That's not great, Andy.
Well,
that's my question.
I think
words
that's
into Tom's mouth, but
that's what got him into trouble, because it happened twice, and that doesn't instill a ton of confidence if you grab someone and then have to release them, and grab somebody else and have to release them. So I understand where the criticism is coming from. To your point, Andy, 33 hours in the grand scheme of things, that's pretty quick. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. But, there were reports that Patel, was on a conference call with his guys and ripped him a new one. And so I think the jury's still out on him as, I'm not willing to say he's a terrible leader and doesn't deserve to be in that job, but I understand where the criticism is coming from because of the way this very, very high profile sort of crisis situation was handled. Yeah. Some aspects of it anyway.
I think he said he was just being transparent, Carl.
Yeah. But Andy, back to, there's the criticism of him from law enforcement is that he's taking orders, presumably from Stephen Miller, to fire agents he doesn't really know what they did or who they are. And in one of the lawsuits alleges that he admitted too much to an agent named Brian Driscoll. People have told him, don't fire this agent, you're making a mistake. And then he fires that agent and then fires the agent who urged him not to. This is not how you build trust in an organization. They're going to say the view from the Trump side of things is that the FBI had been politicized, intensely politicized. Now, there's two things about that. First of all, it's true. Secondly, it's always been true. That's a very political organization, has been since its outset. If you wanted to make it a more legitimate organization that had the trust of people across the spectrum, that's a noble goal. But they're not going about it in a way that would do that. They're sort of doing what was done to them.
How would you go about doing that, Carl?
Well,
I'm interested.
Okay. This is the Carl Cannon plan for the FBI.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of great people who work there. I know some of them. Some of their lawyers are terrific people. Some of the agents too. I would take the FBI building, the J. Edgar Hoover building, and raise it to the ground. I would build in that space, rebuild the museum. In some other place in Washington, I would build a new FBI headquarters, and I would make everybody reapply for their job. And it would be explained to them, We're not going to do what we've done in the past, since the days when we attacked Martin Luther King and the days we tried to set up Trump. We're not going to do any of that. We're a law enforcement agency. And I always have Congress narrow the scope of what they're doing. They shouldn't have to do background checks on federal employees. They shouldn't have to still do bank robberies. They should do, domestic terrorism and, violent crime that crosses state borders. Narrow their scope, get real cops in there, and announce to the world and to each other that they're not going to be political anymore in a brand new building, not named after J. Edgar Hoover. That's my plan.
Okay, so here's one problem I see with your plan. Do you trust,
only one?
Only one. The main problem I see with that, do you trust the Trump administration or, the Gavin Newsom administration or the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez administration to do the hiring and to hire people based on that criteria? I mean, is that really possible to hire agents who are apolitical? You
both know what's coming, and I am expecting the derision. We need a blue ribbon panel.
Yes, there we go.
Oh, now I really know your plan's in trouble.
Yeah. Well, I was for your plan up until that moment. I would relocate it outside of Washington, D.C. I think that would be
bingo.
What I would do. I'd put in
Kansas City, Missouri.
Kansas City. That's my choice too.
That's my choice. That would
be right.
Yeah. And as far as the museum,
they can investigate whether the Kansas City Chiefs are 0-2.
Right. And expanding the museum or bringing the museum back, that's actually an interesting thing. I'll have to think about that. I'm not. The museum was a great place. I used to tape a lot of shows there, and a great studio on the top floor. Missed that. Guys, President Trump ordered a strike on a second Venezuelan boat in international waters, saying it was carrying drugs. He killed 3 individuals with this one, I believe. Venezuelan President Maduro says the U.S. was trying to provoke a, quote, major war. And Time Magazine has an article with the headline, "Is the U.S. at war with Venezuela?" So, Carl, are we at war?
Yeah, this is the question. I with all deference to the president of Venezuela, it wouldn't be a major war. It'd be more like the Falklands War. But this is the question. We've indicted their head of state. Now we're blowing up their ships. We've said this is a narco state. You wonder how far this is going to go and what the next step is. Are we going to kidnap their leader the way we've done that? We did that with the president of Panama. Now these are tin horn dictators, but Maduro was elected. Now we've also said the election was a fraud. We have our bill. The United States government has its bill of particulars against this socialist, guy who we think is profiting from drug dealing. But is he going to seek a declaration of war against this country? Where are we going with this? And also, what's going to happen if and when they retaliate? So, this strikes me as dangerous kind of way to conduct diplomacy. Is that even the right word? International relations. What do you think, Andy?
Well,
you have a degree in international relations.
Well, I think this. I think that we're getting dangerously close. I think there's questions about whether or not we should be firing on these boats, even if we believe that they're full of narco terrorists. Trump's explanation was this, which I find a little wanting. He said, all you have to do is look at the cargo that was spattered all over the ocean, big bags of cocaine and fentanyl all over the place. We recorded them. It was very careful because we know you people, meaning the press, would be after us. We're very careful. I don't think he's being very careful. And I think this is kind of a dangerous situation.
And lashing out at the press for even asking him about it, that's almost a tell, Andy.
Yeah. We've seized about $700 million of his assets. So we are going after him. And at some point, I guess this does, it seems to me it might become a shooting war. It might become a coup. It may become any number of things. But we've been here before. It doesn't tend to end up well.
Well, you people presumably included Rand Paul, who was very critical of the first strike. I think there are members of the Republican Party who are not necessarily comfortable with the way the Trump administration has approached this. But obviously, Trump doesn't care since he did it again. So we'll see.
All right. Well, we have to talk about Robert Redford. Died today at the age of 89. Iconic on the screen, of course. But Carl, he was very active politically. I remember him, for All the President's Men and The Candidate, some of these great political movies he made. And he was an activist off the screen as well, especially when it came to sort of environmental issues. What do you make of Robert Redford?
Well, he came out of Santa Monica High School, went to Colorado briefly as a skier. He was a theater actor and did Barefoot in the Park. And then his first, big picture was Downhill Racer. But the movie that made him a star was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And the studio didn't want him. George Roy Hill did, and Paul Newman did. It was Paul Newman's wife, Joanne Woodward, who actually suggested him for the role. He was unknown at the time. And he's been a mega star since then. He was so handsome that he didn't get really the credit he deserved as an actor. He was only nominated for one Oscar, but he won an Oscar for Ordinary People as a director, and he became a Hollywood icon for years. But he didn't like the Hollywood system, and he's the sort of modern father of indie films. He set up Sundance Institute in Utah, and it launched 1,000 careers. He got in a famous fight with William Goldman, wrote the screenplay to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and won an Oscar for it, and was paid $400,000 in 1969. It'd be well over $1 million today. But they got in a public spat over who really wrote the screenplay to All the President's Men. I admire and love Redford and William Goldman, so I'm just going to stay out of that one. But I ran into Redford once. He was, as you said, Andy, he was a Democrat. He was nominally involved in Democratic politics, but mostly on the environmental side. And in 1996 campaign, Bill Clinton was running against Dole, and he set aside some millions of acres in Utah to try and win votes in Arizona. It was a gambit that worked for him. And but Clinton had never been associated with the environment really at all. He's a policy wonk, and I don't say he was anti-environment, but it just wasn't his issue. And Redford was there that day. He was behind the rope line, and I walked over to him, and he was wearing jeans and a white shirt and had a jean jacket or leather jacket, something over his shoulder. It was a hot day, and he was wearing sunglasses. He looked like Robert Redford. And I walked over to him, and I said, I introduced myself. He said hello. He was very friendly, not warm, but nice. And I said, so is Bill Clinton an environmentalist? And Redford took off his glasses and looked at me. He said, well, he is today. Which was faint praise, but
that's
anyway.
I do not have any stories about Robert Redford, but this Thing is one of my favorite movies. Redford and Newman together were the height at the height of their powers were, magical, and the two best looking iconic, Hollywood movie stars ever. And Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, obviously, those guys were, yeah.
Do you have any secret, the two of you, any sort of lesser known, your favorite Robert Redford?
Oh, I've got one for The Candidate.
Okay, The Candidate.
Which,
The Natural. You can't. The Natural is one of the great baseball movies of all time.
Mine would maybe be Electric Horseman.
Oh, well, The Candidate, and because this is Real Clear Politics, I think our listeners and our viewers would enjoy going back because it's shot, it actually was supposed to be part of a trilogy with Downhill Racer, The Candidate, and then they were going to do a third film, which they didn't, all in this sort of cinema verite style, which was very interesting.
Well, it was supposed to be based on John Tunney, I think, the senator from California.
I don't know. It always struck me as it was Gary Hart, Bill Clinton. It was sort of every politician of that era sort of rolled into one. But people should really watch it. There's some great scenes in it of him in the back of the limo where he's sort of repeating this speech, and really, that's a not well-known film of his that I think.
I agree with you.
Our viewers would enjoy. Anyway, we're going to take a break. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl. We'll be back with more right after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and for our next segment, we've invited Charlie Stone, a contributor at RCP, to share his latest interview that he conducted for the RCP video series, The Unknowns. Charlie's guest is New York Times journalist and author David Gellis, and they discuss Gellis's new biography. It's called Dirtbag Billionaire, How Yvon Chouinard Built Patagonia, Made a Fortune, and Gave It All Away. Now, here's Charlie Stone in conversation with David Gellis.
David, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Obviously, everybody knows Patagonia, right? It's a named national global brand. Give me the sense of why you decided to write this book and what intrigued you about the founder of Patagonia.
Well, I've been covering business for more than 20 years now. I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of CEOs over that time. And I got to say, this company and this founder stood out just about compared to every other company I've written about. And that's for a bunch of reasons. This was a company that embraced social and environmental responsibility in a really serious way. It wasn't just greenwashing. But then in 2022, just 3 years ago, I broke the news that Yvon Chouinard had actually given away his entire equity stake in this $3 to $6 billion company. And he didn't want it. He didn't want to be a billionaire. And when I wrote that story, it was such a contrast to the most of the billionaire stories I wrote. I said, there's a deeper story here and I got to tell it.
Well, you described him as deeply authentic. Just give me a sense of that process. I mean, how many times did you sit down with him? Were there things that intrigued you? Were there things that you didn't realize while meeting with him?
Yeah, I mean, no question. Whenever you embark on a long reporting project, a book, a biography, you discover all sorts of things that you didn't know at the outset. And so that, of course, happened over the several years I spent on the reporting and writing of this book. And I'll just note a couple. I mean, number one, Patagonia was a military contractor. I think most people probably don't think of them as a maker of special operations gear, but they ran a big business making gear for Navy SEALs and Army Rangers for a long time because they knew how to make the best stuff. Here's another one. They worked with Walmart for years and years. They almost collaborated on some projects together. So these kind of chapters in the company's history were fascinating and revelatory. And they did come out over my many, many hours and days and weeks together that I spent with Chouinard. Now, full disclosure, he is a reluctant interviewer. He is a press shy person. He has been uncomfortable with attention of all sorts his entire life. And so while I was privileged to have a good amount of time with him, we did hours and hours of Zoom calls. I did spend many days with him at his home in Wyoming, on the road in Argentina. He, still never revealed to me, I think, his deepest, darkest secrets. I never got inside his dreams, for example. So there was that I think is a function both of who he is as a person in terms of his relationship to the press, but also the fact that he is a very simple and consistent person in some ways. And in fact, the same language he was using with me, I could find in interviews that he had given back in the 70s. Like nothing's changed in some ways with this man.
Well, your book title is somewhat controversial. It's Dirtbag Billionaire. I've read in other interviews that the founder didn't mind dirtbag but hated billionaire. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. And it's important to note here that dirtbag, in common parlance can be used as just sort of a trivial insult, right? It's sort of like not a good person. That's not what it means in this context. A dirtbag in the climbing community, in the outdoors community, is really a term of endearment. It refers to someone who is so passionate about the outdoors, so committed to their sport, that they are literally willing to sleep in the dirt and forswear material possessions and all the material comforts if it gets them that much closer to nature, that much closer to their next adventure. So when he heard this story, when he heard the title of the book, he liked the word dirtbag, he didn't like the word billionaire.
So Yvon is sort of a dichotomy, right? You have someone reluctant entrepreneur who also was a billionaire. He's pushed back on some of the elements of capitalism. How did you feel that he reconciled that? I mean, if I was a billionaire, I'd be like, I hate capitalism, right? So why? What is it about capitalism that he does not like?
Yeah, well, first, I just want to go back to this first question you asked, which was, how did he reconcile it? He never did. And that to me is part of the sort of heart and soul of this book. is the reality that this is not going to be reconciled, that this is a paradox with no tidy resolution. And I'm very upfront about this, right? This book is full of contradictions. It's full of, instances that people can say are hypocritical, but it's in the process of Chenard and his team working through that, trying to understand their own failings, that they draw their inspiration and their motivation to keep going forward and to try to keep getting better. And that was a process that I thought sounded totally compelling. As for why he didn't like capitalism, as it were, for all the reasons that, I think many of your readers and listeners know, right? Extreme inequality, environmental impact. There's all sorts of things about our modern economy that are really problematic. And he's just one of those people who wasn't willing to turn a blind eye to all those negative externalities, to use an economist's term, because he was happy with the material wealth that he was able to gain as a part of his participation in that process.
But there's been some pushback. I mean, he obviously, either himself or his attorneys were quite savvy. They developed a 501c4, which allowed donations to go to the 501c4, and that 501c4 has been funding, right, all sorts of political activities around the environment and other things that not everybody who buys a Patagonia jacket may agree with. Give me a sense of that. It's like he's using the capitalist system, he's using the laws of the United States for his advantage, and yet pushes back on them.
Yeah, all true. And I don't think he would dispute any of what you just said. Important to note here, though, that he's been an activist for 50 years. He's been funding political activism for the causes he cares about for a long time. And so this new structure, when they set it up, was absolutely designed to give the profits from Patagonia an opportunity to be used on political issues that he and his team felt were aligned with the causes they cared about, which mostly are around conservation, protecting natural lands, combating the climate crisis. But I think you said something really important. He's operating in the system in which he exists. He's not naive, and the Patagonia executives are not naive enough to believe that they can magically snap their fingers and fix all of capitalism's problems. Instead, what they try to do is figure out how they can sort of stay within the bounds, but also advance the causes that they care most about.
Are you surprised? I mean, Gallup polls are starting to look at how Americans view capitalism. A couple of years ago, 60% of Americans approved of capitalism. Now it's down to 54%. Do you think is that a trend? Is that just a blip? What is your sense?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, it sounds like the general public is finally catching up to Patagonia's point of view, if anything. These people have been long mistrustful of the capitalist system. And I think we're starting to see in our economy all the reasons why. I mean, wealth inequality is out of control. Prices keep going up. A sense of opportunity sort of passing people by. So those familiar complaints aren't necessarily what drove the Patagonia team to do all the work they did over the years. But I see those numbers all the time, and I'm never surprised because I've been covering business for decades now. And while it generates extraordinary wealth and extraordinary opportunity and amazing products and services, on balance, and this was really the topic of my last book, The Man Who Broke Capitalism, which was all about General Electric CEO Jack Welch, it has not distributed those gains even remotely evenly, right? We live in a society where there is a prospering upper class and a whole bunch of people who are getting left behind. And until that fixes, I don't expect these numbers to change anytime soon.
Well, David, thank you so much. Appreciate your time. And where can people get the book?
Anywhere books are sold. It's called Dirtbag Billionaire: How Yvon Chouinard Built Patagonia, Made a Fortune, and Gave It All Away.
You've been listening to RCP contributor Charlie Stone in conversation with New York Times journalist and author David Gellis. You can hear and see the full exchange, as well as more of Charlie's interview series on RealClearPolitics.com. And that will do it for today's program. Tomorrow on Sirius XM POTUS, you will not hear us, but you will hear Stephen A. Smith's brand new radio show. It's definitely worth checking out. And then we'll be back here on Thursday. So we hope to see you then. I'm Andrew Walworth, and on behalf of Carl, Tom, Charlie, and all of us at RCP, thank you for listening, and we'll be back on Thursday. Have a great evening.